If you don't want to be on screen, then take your picture off. But we're also happy to have you on screen. So good morning, everybody, and welcome, Michael Becketts. Dr. Michael Becketts serves as the Director of Department of Family Services for Fairfax County, Virginia. In his current role, he provides executive leadership over several areas of work, including adult and aging services, children, youth and family services, domestic and sexual violence services, and public benefits and employment services. During his career that spans more than 20 years, Michael has worked in settings that provide supportive services in the areas of child welfare, aging, mental health, juvenile justice, academic medicine, and education, with a career focus on supporting the health, safety, and well-being of people facing vulnerabilities. And he told me this morning he's going to be a keynote speaker at Harvard this weekend. So welcome, Dr. Becketts. We are so excited to have you. And just so you all know, he was a keynote last year, and he was so good that we brought him back. So excited to hear you. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I always sort of sit back and I'm a little embarrassed by all of the stuff that is in that bio. Like, I feel like it's just way too much. It's just way too much. But good morning. Thanks for inviting me back. Last year, I talked about sort of leadership and sort of teamwork and the lessons that we can learn from geese. And that was sort of fun. And I was thinking, this time, what could I talk about that seems relevant to the topic, to the theme of this week? And I, in talking to Robin, I got to this place around talking about the power of yes, and sort of reflecting on sort of who we are as individual people, especially when opportunities sort of come to our doorstep. And so, there's so many experiences and aspects of our identities that make us who we are. And when I was thinking about this, I used to be a trainer for the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I really do like to think sometimes that I am a student of Stephen Covey. Many of you who don't work for DFS, we actually do have some leadership development work that we do through the Franklin Covey Institute. And one of the things that Dr. Covey sort of said is, I am not a product of my circumstances. I am a product of my decisions. And to me, that's such a powerful statement, because what it offers us is the opportunity to sort of envision who we want to be in relation to sort of who we are today. And so when we take time to honestly reflect on sort of the vision that we have of our future and the choices that we have made that have created the present that we're in, it really does give us an opportunity to authentically reflect on how the choices that we've made have either helped or hindered the trajectory of our life path. And so, Stephen Covey says, we are the product of our decisions. We are not necessarily hampered by the environment. And it doesn't mean that we don't have to be thoughtful and considerate about how the environment impacts us, but we can make choices that sort of allow us to sort of move closer to our personal sort of mission and vision statement. And so one of the things I do like to talk about, I like to talk through storytelling. And so when I was reflecting on this presentation, I started thinking about my professional journey. And I go back to the first time that I envisioned what I wanted to be when I grew up. And one of the things, a lot of us sort of think, oh yeah, you want to be a policeman, you want to be a fireman, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer. And, but when I was 13 years old, I'd gone to a youth retreat at Western Maryland College. And that's important because that youth retreat introduced me to the college I eventually went to. I was 13 years old at this youth retreat, and some of the facilitators asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I either want to help people by like being a psychologist, or I wanted to work in computers. So that was what I thought about where I wanted to be. That was my vision for myself when I was 13 years old. And And I think that that vision sort of led to me becoming a social worker who spent more time developing computer systems than you could ever imagine, or I would have imagined as a social worker. When I think about my identity as a social worker, when I was in my mid-20s, after a few years in the profession, I'd gotten a master's degree from University of Maryland in social work. I did my what I call my 2 years of sort of frontline sort of work doing case management and foster care and child welfare. I started really envisioning where did I want to be, because there were a couple of things I realized. And I realized that um, I didn't want to be a caseworker forever. During my internship, I met this woman who had this is my second graduate school internship. She was a caseworker and she loved that work. And she had done it for 35 years. And I could not imagine doing that. And I started to think, where do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the social work profession? And I thought success as a social worker would be working full time at an agency, sort of doing some program management, doing some clinical work on the side, doing therapy and teaching a class or two at a local university. I was about 25 or so when that happened, when I had that sort of vision about what I wanted to be. And so then when I was 30, just 5 years later, I was managing a residential program for adolescent boys, teaching at the University of Maryland, and I was a part-time therapist. And I thought, this can't be it, right? I can't be at what I thought would be the pinnacle of my professional career in 5 years. And so I started to really think about what's next. And again, reflecting on my past, I believe that the vision I had for myself and my personal mission to immerse myself in different aspects of the helping profession helped shape this path that really aligned my choices with the vision I had for myself. And I wholeheartedly believe that having more of a proactive mindset really did help me on my journey. And so one of the things that Covey sort of brings to us in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is this idea of proactive versus reactive language. And sort of being thoughtful and proactive is at the foundation of our future success. And I put a little star next to success to remind me to say that success is not defined by anybody other than the individual themselves. Right. And so it is not the environment, it's not the people in it. It is about the vision that you have for yourself and how you choose to achieve that vision. The literature grounds us in the idea that language shapes beliefs. Our self-talk also shapes our behavior. When we say things like, oh, he makes me so mad, or I did that because he said, it really does absolve us from any responsibility for our own actions, for our own choices. And I've heard in my role as a manager and director so many times where people will talk about how they were passed over for opportunity, or how they or made assumptions about why they weren't selected for an opportunity, why they didn't get the promotion, or why they didn't get the job that they were looking for. And so often it was putting the responsibility on others. Oh, I didn't get that job because they already knew who they wanted. I didn't get that job because, or I didn't get asked to be on that committee, or I didn't get asked to sort of represent the department, the agency, my unit in that place because. Very rarely have I heard people sort of say, I wonder what I could have done better. I wonder what I could have done differently. I wonder what I could have done to prepare myself for the opportunity when that opportunity knocks. And I have had experiences where I've had that conversation with people and have said, why don't you go and talk to that person who made that decision and they didn't select you? And have a approach with humility and in a space of vulnerability to be given the critique to help you understand what it is you could have done differently. A colleague of mine in North Carolina and we can carry a metaphor out for lots of iterations. And one of the things that we used to talk about is dress for the job that you want, not the one you have. And that's not about the clothes that you wear. This is about, are you prepared to do the things that come sort of to you that you least expect? Are you ready for when opportunity knocks? Because sometimes opportunity knocks. And if you're not ready to answer, it passes you by. And then you wonder when it's going to come around again. And it may not when you want it. And so how do we prepare ourselves? My mother said to me a long time ago, you're one of the most prepared people I have ever met. And she was talking about education. Because at that point, I had gone to social work school. I'd gone to I'd gone back and got a degree in health administration. I now have a master's in education where I focus on adult learning. And Robin was talking about the PhD I earned. My mother said, you just got options, right? And I do credit that with having a lens on where I want to be, how I want to show up, how I want to be sort of helpful. Richard Branson, the guy who owns sort of Virgin Atlantic, says, if someone offers you an amazing opportunity to do something and you're not sure if you can do it, just say yes. Just say yes. And then learn how to do it later. You have no idea how many times I've heard, oh, can you help us do that thing? And I'm like, sure, of course I can. Of course I can. And then I'm like Googling, well, how do you do that? Because I recognize that there are things that I do have that are transferable skills. And the benefits of saying yes are many. There's so many opportunities that arise when you start saying yes. Saying yes gives you the opportunity to stretch yourself and grow beyond your imagination. It increases.
Michael, did we lose you for a sec? Is Michael frozen to you all? Yeah, I
Yes.
think he's,
Yeah, I don't see him at all, actually.
Yeah, frozen
yeah,
on
I
my
think
end as
he's
well.
coming back probably. I think Teams is having fun with us today. So I'm sure he'll be right back. And we'll just, while we're waiting for him, yeah, I want you guys to think about the last time somebody asked you to do something. And did you say yes? Maybe? No? I know we can't say yes to everything, but let's see. No, Michael, we can't. We lost you. Maybe go out and come back. There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we got you, Michael. Thank you.
Alrighty. Sorry about that. Teams
No,
kicked me
Teams
out.
is having fun with us today.
Let me present in Teams.
It's not fun if we don't have a
Present.
pivot, at least in one of
Right.
our sessions, Michael.
Let me pop that out so I can see
Flexibility.
folks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Where was I? I was talking about the benefits of saying yes. So yes improves relationships. When we say yes to helping other people, we build stronger relationships and we create a more supportive community. And I think that's so important at work. And when Robin and I were talking about me speaking, and I came up with this idea, I really thought about this idea that this construct of quiet quitting that has come up sort of in the world in social media, where people are saying, I'm only going to do the things that I am paid to do. I'm only going to do the things that are in my job description. In my head, then you will always be where you are without opportunity for growth and development. So you can quit quietly and you will stay there, and then you wonder, well, why am I not being asked to? Why am I being passed over? Quiet quitting doesn't help you meet your vision of who you want to be in the future, unless the vision that you have is to be in that same seat 5, 10, 15 years from now. When you say yes, realize that being asked is a compliment, that someone may see things in you that you don't see in yourself, right? And I was telling Robin, like, the idea that I'm going to be sort of presenting at Harvard over the weekend, it's in front of a group of people who are supposedly some of the biggest sort of influential people in child welfare in the country. You know, my presentation panel includes the commissioner for the Administration for Children and Families. I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, do they know who they asked to sort of talk? Right? How did my name get in? Yeah, but I do credit sort of the opportunities that come my way to sort of figuring out how to say yes to the right things. As Robin was saying, as we were having all of this chaos with teams, you can't say yes to everything, and I'm definitely going to sort of talk about that. But a couple of questions that I get a lot is, what did you do to get your position? And how do you get it all done? And I realize that the answer to both of these questions, there's two answers. One is, I have a clear vision of sort of what I want my future to be, and I revise that vision over time, so that if I feel like I'm in a rut, I have the opportunity to sort of give myself permission to make changes to how I envision my future. So often, and my niece called me one day and she says, "Uncle Mike, I'm moving to Florida in March." I was like, "Really? Do you have a job yet? Do you have a place to live?" She said, "No, I'll get it." And it was like 3 months away. I was just like, how about we start with, "Uncle Mike, I'm going to get a job in Florida, and then I'm going to move," right? If your vision is to be in Florida, let's pick it apart on how you're going to be successful.
Matthew.
Who's calling Matthew? And so you know, I often enjoy a challenge that helps me learn something new, that helps me stretch my skills, and also those that allow me to use the tools that I've already developed in new ways. My vision for myself is to be able to help as many people as possible. That has guided my decisions in sort of my professional journey. So for instance, I will never do therapy again. I do not believe that I am the person to try to help change the world one person or one family at a time. That is just not aligned with where I see sort of myself going. Will that change over time as I get closer to retirement or something like that? Maybe, but that's about me revising my vision over time. But right now, I want to be able to help as many people as I possibly can. I want to help improve systems so that they make sense to those people who are being served and to the people who work in them, right? And so it makes sense that I was the deputy director for Baltimore City Department of Social Services, and then became the director of another Department of Social Services in North Carolina. Opportunities knock when you least expect them. Someone called me and said, "Hey, the secretary would like for you to consider joining her transition team and be assistant secretary for human services for the state of North Carolina. Is that something you can do?" And I was just like, "Ooh, that's nice. But do I really want to do it?" Right? You can't say yes to everything. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Saying yes to a new project can help you so much. But I do want to take a step back and say that this is not about work. This is about how we live our lives, right? That there's so many things that we have to consider when we make a choice to say yes to opportunities. And I was thinking, I think this is a pivotal decision in my professional journey. And this is actually the very first time I remember saying yes to work. And I was a sophomore. It was after my freshman year in college, and I was trying to find a job. So I decided to register with a company called Kelly Temp Services. And I was like, I can answer the phone, I can type, I can be an admin right now and sort of support an organization. And I got my first call. It was 2 days, and all I had to do was answer the phone and a couple of other small office things. It was great. And I was, back then it was like 1992, yeah, it was like the summer of 1992. Sounds so long ago. I'm not that old though. Um, and so, but then they called me the next day. I didn't have a job, and they called me really early in the morning. They said, we have a temp who had an emergency dental thing. Now, the problem is we know that you can handle 2 phone lines, but this company has 12 phone lines. Do you think you'd be able to do that? We're in a pinch. And I was just like, 12 phone lines. Can I answer 12 phone lines? And I was like Richard Branson says, when opportunity comes, just say yes or figure out how to do it. And so I said yes. About an hour later, I showed up. Yep, you're right. One at a time. You can't talk on 2 phone lines at once, right? So somebody's going to be on hold. And I just said yes. And I'm sitting there, and I was bored to tears because the phones, while there were 12 lines, they weren't ringing. So I said to the ladies, I said, is there anything I can do while I'm sitting here? And they were like, you're asking for work? I'm like, yeah, I'm dying here. I'm like, I'm really bored. They gave me a stack of papers and said it'd be really great if you could just put this in alphabetical order to really helping our filing. It was about a couple hundred sheets of paper, and I was done in 15 minutes. And I said, hey, do you have any more? They were like, you're done. I was just like, well, it's the alphabet. So, and I'm in college. It wasn't hard to put this in alphabetical order. And a couple other things happened that by the end of breakfast time on my second day, one of the ladies came to me and said, how would you like to stay here all summer? And I said, well, you already have somebody. And like, I'm just here covering. And they was like, that's our problem. How would you like to, we like how you show up. Saying yes to that opportunity, and then engaging them as an employer where I was like, I don't feel in my head, retrospectively, you're not getting the bang out of your buck, and I'm bored to tears. Can I have more work? Created the opportunity where in 1992 or whatever year it was, I was making like $17 an hour for a whole summer. I was living the life. And so, but that was like the first time I really connected saying yes at work to sort of creating opportunity. And I was able to go back summer after summer without wondering what I was going to do next. So, so, um, so yeah, that was like the first time I remember saying yes. I would say the second time that was most influential for me was I've gotten calls from secretaries twice. I was working in Baltimore City overseeing private child welfare for the state of Maryland. And I ended up in a work group with the Secretary of the Department of Health, the Department of Human Services, and the Baltimore City DSS director. And about a month and a half later, I get a telephone call from the secretary. Now, he was at the gym and called me while on the treadmill, and then got another call. So he was like, hey, Mike, I was just wondering, what are your career goals? I was like, and then he put me on hold because he got another call. Imagine if I didn't have a vision for myself. Imagine if you get that call and you haven't thought about where you're going. I was easily able to say to the secretary, my vision for myself at this point is to be able to run my own agency, to be the director of a department. And when he came back, he was like, how would you like to be deputy director for Baltimore City DSS? Because in Maryland, it's a state agency. So I would be moving from the state office into a local office, but it was still state government. It was one of the most interesting decisions. It was one of the most interesting times I said yes, because I worked 100% of sort of every day, almost 24 hours a day for 2 years. But saying yes to that opportunity, I guarantee you, led me to where I am today. It put me on the path to being a director in another place, assistant secretary, and being director of the largest department of families or social services in the Commonwealth. So opportunities come, right? But can we, or should we always say yes? Absolutely not. But we have to understand how we make that decision. And as I was sort of putting this together, I thought about the role we have versus the role we want, sort of the mission of the organization that we're in, and if this is work related, or the personal mission that we have for ourselves, the priorities that we have in our life, and sort of our capacity to actually take on something new. Somehow, these things have to align, or we have to be willing to make changes to how we are living today in order to sort of meet our vision for ourselves tomorrow. In some situations, we should take the time to evaluate how saying yes is going to impact these important sort of parts of our life. And again, this is and I talk about things like this at DFS a lot. This is not about work, because if I talk like this about work, I feel like I'm missing the boat. I want Michelle Cover, who happens to be on my screen right now, to sort of understand that I'm interested in her personal as well as her professional development, that I would hope that sort of working at DFS, that opportunities come, that sort of that sort of help sort of meeting her personal sort of vision, her personal mission. And yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine sort of stagnating, right? And not creating opportunity for folks. Next slide. So when I say role, does this opportunity that's being presented to us help us move us from where we are to what our vision is? And how does it support my current work? How does it support what I'm currently doing? And I think at the foundation of this, it is, how will I grow? How will the organization that I'm with benefit from the energy that I am going to put in? We have to have answers to these questions. Sometimes it's not necessary, especially at work. A lot of us are working in offices and things where we've been asked to take on sort of a new opportunity because of caseloads increasing, or workloads increasing, caseloads increasing. But if we recognize that what we're doing is contributing to the greater good to support us, sort of moving the organizations that we're in closer to achieving its mission, and every one of us here are working to improve sort of the community that we serve. And so I can't imagine that there's a lot of things that are being asked of us that aren't aligned with that sort of strategic frame to improve the community that we're serving. So I think in terms of role at work, when I say, hey, Michelle, can you look at sort of how we do X, Y, and Z? Can you sort of research that piece? Can you take on that project? If Michelle doesn't see the alignment, what I hope she would do is say, so how is this connected to what we're supposed to be doing? If I ask Michelle to sort of go and sort of look at how we might get a new fire hydrant, that's not aligned with who we are as a department. But if I say, Michelle, I'm really interested in how we improve our clinical trainings for staff by onboarding sort of a vendor to do X, Y, and Z, can you take that on as your role? It may not have been something that she had thought about as being a task for her, but if she can see it as part of sort of contributing to the greater good and relate it to her work, then it's an easy yes. When the deputy county executive calls me and says, hey, there's this new project, can you take that on? It's easy to say yes when you can see the alignment sort of with the mission of of this part of what I call the mega sort of structure, that superstructure of the county. When I also think about mission and vision, both personal and work. At work, is there alignment with the mission of the organization, current or future, with these current or future opportunities? And for those opportunities outside of work, is there alignment with your future vision? One of the things that I am outside of work, I really do believe in sort of the value of service. And so at work, I do lots of sort of boards and committees and what others might consider outside of work as volunteerism. But I don't live in Fairfax County. I actually live in Manassas Park. And when I moved there, I started looking for opportunities. Now, remember, and you might know, but when I moved to Manassas Park, that was 2020. I was still in grad school. I was working in Fairfax County. I had 2 dogs, a partner, like all of this stuff was going on. And I get, well, why do you want to do this now? This is at home. It was because I value service. I value giving back. I value understanding the communities that I live in. And, and so there was alignment with personal mission. But then there's also priorities. How does taking on something new, how does saying yes to a new opportunity or making changes impact sort of those priority areas in our life? Family, work, sort of our faith organizations that we may belong to, sort of, and just sort of other aspects and other domains of life. Sometimes opportunities sort of knock and we want to say yes, but we realize that it's going to take us away from our kids, or it's going to take us away from sort of the organizations that we're already committed to. And it doesn't mean that we have to say no. It means that we may have to go into conversation with those people who represent those priority areas about how we're going to manage together to make sure that we are still mission focused, that we're still family focused, that we still maintain our moral center, that we are still able to sort of, maintain our budget, you know. But capacity is one of the things that I think is also equally important. Do we have the time to do this? Do we have the mental and physical energy? Do we have the budget? Not necessarily money. And people say, I talk about time like it's money. I spend time like it's money. When you are in school, working a full-time job, doing volunteer work, I budget my priorities. I look at my calendar like a bank account. And the time that those little boxes sort of on calendars sort of create, that is something that I spend. And so when someone says, can you do this? The first thing I do is I look at my calendar. When someone at work says, can you meet? I say my calendar is complete. My calendar is up to date, and I never change my calendar. I never take things off that I've done, and I never leave things on that I know I'm not going to do, because every block, every 15-minute block is as valuable in time at work as money is in the bank, because there's only but so much of a resource of time. And so I budget time. And some people get my time freely. In the middle of this meeting, if there was a fire in the building that needed to be put out and I'm the only one with a fire hose, I may have to go because a child is at risk and my decision is imperative, right? That's really important. We have to be able to prioritize those things that sort of make us tick. I always said with grad school, that last time, and I'm never going back to grad school, I said, work allows me to go to school. School does not do anything for work. And so if there was a choice between a presentation for class and a presentation for the county executive, we knew what won, because it was about how I prioritize my time. That's how I knew what I could say yes to. And so with no, we know what we get. We get more of the same. We get people that pass over us, that don't ask us questions anymore. We all have people in our lives who you pick up the phone and you call and say, hey, would you like to go out? Would you like to do this? Would you like to come over? And every time you ask, they say no. And at some point you stop prioritizing sort of those folks. Well, if we are the ones who are constantly saying no to opportunity, people will stop asking us. And we will never have those opportunities come to us that we actually think will help lead us to our vision. I also like to think that saying yes to things, even if it seems a little mundane, it actually breaks up some of the monotony of our day, especially when we feel like we're in a rut. Sometimes just a little bit of change energizes us. But again, we know what we get when we say no. Saying yes to things that fit in the context of our sort of priority areas opens up so much opportunity for us. So the challenge, just sort of in the end, that I think is really helpful is that when opportunity knocks, don't react to the opportunity. Be thoughtful, be reflective of what is coming your way. ask, how does it fit in the context of the role that you hold, that people are asking you to do it? If it's a parent, a dog owner, an employee, a member of a faith institution, a volunteer, and someone comes to you and says, hey, can you do this? This is a great opportunity. Ask how it fits in the context of the role that you have and where you want to see yourself. Is it aligned with your mission or the mission of the organization or the vision that you have for yourself? Are you really able to fit it in the priorities that you have? And do you really have the capacity? Because if we don't have the capacity, sometimes we overcommit. You ever meet a person who always says yes and then underdelivers? Oh, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. And then you ask them for the thing that they said yes to, and they haven't gotten to it yet. The challenge is to really be reflective of who you are sort of in the present, to determine if you can actually take on sort of things in the future. And again, the answer isn't necessarily no, it is how do I shift priorities? Am I budgeting my time well? Throughout all of the things that I did professionally and in school, I watched more TV with my husband than you can possibly imagine. Because in the end, that was how we were able to spend lots of time together, just occupying the same space, having something that was familiar to both of us for a short period of time. Project Runway, Fear of the Walking Dead, something that we could align ourselves with together that helped us remain in each other's presence. That's how we were able to prioritize sort of the 60 hours, 70 hours a week plus sleep that was already sort of taken on my calendar. Saying yes is not always easy, and it's a challenge. And it's a challenge that we should take on if we want to move from where we are to where we want to be. So with that, Robin, I will sort of take any questions or comments from the chat, or we can sit here and look at each other for 10 minutes.
Well, I thank you so much. There's so much there, and I really appreciate it. And I want to open it up to let people ask questions because I know they're going to have some for you. Vanessa has her hand up. Vanessa, go ahead.
Come on, Vanessa. If you're talking, you're on mute. Vanessa, we can't hear you.
Vanessa, did you have a question? All right, well, we'll wait for Vanessa. Maybe she'll come back. Anybody else have a question, comments? Who do you have for Michael? Tina, go ahead.
Hi, Robin. More of a comment than a question. I just want to say great job to Dr. Becketts. I have the privilege of working with him, for him, by him, and he really is an excellent partner and leader for Department of Family Services. But I love how he talked about the saying yes to people, because it's not just us saying yes and building our own professional growth and going through that, but it's also how we're making the other person that we're saying yes to feel, and letting them see how we are actually working through personal values or professional values, and how we also value people, and we're building partnerships, and we get them to say yes too. So I appreciate this message today.
Thanks, Trina. I will put that in your evaluation notes. Thank you so much. But there's a question in the chat, then we can go to Lois. One question is, have you ever said yes to something that you later realized didn't align with your values? And I did. And I would say the best and worst decision I've made was to take on the role of Assistant Secretary for Human Services for the state of North Carolina. It was a great opportunity. I've sat with the governor every week talking about sort of things and presented before the North Carolina legislature, really growing beyond what I was doing as a director of social services. It was a great opportunity because I don't think I'd be in Fairfax if I did not have that experience, right? But it was also, I jumped in chasing title and opportunity. And it was aligned with what I thought I wanted to do professionally. But what I also realized was that the environment that I was in was not conducive to the change that that I was promised that I would be able to make. And I, as much as I'm glad I did that, I also probably equally wish I had never sort of entered that space in the helping profession. It was all too political, very cutthroat, and I didn't go in eyes wide open. I went in sort of chasing the opportunity, and and what I've learned as I've grown in my career, sort of chasing title and sort of like an extra $5,000 or $10,000 in salary, it sounds good until you're in it and it doesn't align with sort of what your mission and your personal vision is for yourself. And then you start thinking, how are you going to sort of manage what you value? And I absolutely valued sort of my sanity. And I ended up saying I needed to get out of there. When I said to myself, go and look at your bank account, go look at your leave balances, go look at whatever, and then go quit. I knew that I needed to do something different, but I also wasn't going to be self-destructive. Lois?
Yeah, 3 quick things. One is I'm so impressed that you have 4 degrees. That's amazing. Unless I miscounted and you actually have 5, even more amazing. Second is thanks for repping Fairfax County to the Harvard folks this weekend. And the third thing is the actual question is you talked about being on the receiving end of getting opportunities and getting people to ask you to step up and take on different roles. What about on the other side of that? Like, have you done that for other people, and what do you look for when you're looking for somebody to take on an extra opportunity that you would like them to do?
Oh, that is such a good question. I always say, or I've said a lot, not always, but I've said a lot that my success is really sort of founded on the success of the people around me. And so I am often, and I think Trina could attest to this, I'm often looking for ways to help people grow. I would say under my leadership, if you look at, especially in North Carolina, there are 4 or 5 people in North Carolina who we focused on, again, this is about professional and personal growth, who are now directors of social services, or there's actually one who is an assistant county executive, who were like managers under me. And what we did was we saw opportunity. We saw people who wanted to grow. I always find it impressive that when, like, I love being able to say, Trina worked for DFS in Fairfax County, and now look, she is now the assistant commissioner, the deputy commissioner for aging for the Commonwealth. Like, I take pride in that, right? My job is to not stifle growth. My job is to grow. And one of the things that I do, Lois, is that when there's a person who reports directly to me, who works with me, one of the conversations that I have is, where do you see yourself? What's your vision for yourself? Because I make no qualms about it. I don't expect people to stay in their roles forever. People have a vision for themselves well beyond what it means to be the assistant for the director or to be a deputy. A deputy wants to be a director or an executive director of a nonprofit or of another organization. And so how do we make sort of the best of the time that we have together? And how do we sort of promote sort of personal and professional development from within, and then create opportunity? And that is sort of that is an artifact in sort of my leadership style. Ahmad?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure.
Hi, Michael, or maybe you have a
Michael.
PhD title.
Yeah,
You prefer
Michael is
Dr. Beckett.
I actually prefer Michael.
Oh, okay, good, great. Thank you, Michael, for this great presentation. It was inspiring, at least for me, and I learned a lot, and it was encouraging as well. So I am a HS1,
Okay.
or rather HSW1, Human Case Worker 1I, and I keep applying for merit-based positions, and it's important to have a stable, sustainable position with the county, and I'm interested in working here and being promoted. But the only issue is that I keep applying, and as you mentioned, I say yes to challenges, to different positions, but I don't hear back from the county, from the HR department. And I try to be a little bit not, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but like proactive. So I reached out to them. I emailed them. I said, hey, I'm interested in this position, the exact same position that I have, but it's a merit-based position. And the deadline was actually is tomorrow, 27th. And I haven't heard back from them. So the HR, maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe I need to be
Right.
less proactive, or
Yeah.
so I want to hear from you. I know this is very specific one, but maybe it's a question for a lot of like non-merit employees who are maybe shy, or maybe they want to have this conversation in a private setting. But I appreciate if you briefly answer. Thank you.
No, and so a couple of things. One, thanks for sort of being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. I do appreciate that. I think at DFS, human resources doesn't do the hiring. They facilitate the hiring process. And so talking to human resources helps you understand where things are in the process, but doesn't necessarily help very much in terms of your advocacy for yourself. One of the things that I would do, and what I've encouraged other people to do, is go to hiring managers, not necessarily the hiring manager for that position, right? But go to a hiring manager, go to their supervisor. Believe it or not, we are rather approachable, and ask them, what are you looking for? Right. And really, and if you've applied for positions before, it might also sort of be helpful to enter a conversation with a hiring manager who interviewed you before and say, not why did I not get the job, but what is it that I need to grow into that position? And so enter that conversation with a sense of humility and a little bit of a tough skin, right? Because you might learn things about yourself that others see about you that you might say, oh, wow, that's it, right? If I sort of do these things a little bit differently, if I show up a little bit differently, and sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with you. It could absolutely be about the applicant pool itself, and that others may have sort of different credentials that are more that are in the preferred end against sort of where you are right now. So I would say let's not take it personally, because nothing is really personal, right? Sort of take the opportunity and go to people and have that conversation about what you might be able to sort of do differently, how you might show up differently in the interview process. That's what I would do. And again, a lot of times there's this sort of us versus them mentality, like, but we're all people, right? And in DFS, and I'm sure across the county, what we want to do is create an environment where what we do is attend to people first and position second, right? So that would be my advice. We are at 9:48.
I was going to say we have time for one more question. There's one in the chat, Michael. Can you see it? Do you want me to read it? It says, I'm curious how you took your less positive North Carolina experience to the next step when you were analyzed the Fairfax County opportunity. So how did you assess the opportunity differently?
That's a really great question. And so I did a lot of preparation for my experience in Fairfax County in the interview process. And one of the things I did was I learned a lot about the county. And the great part is learning about organizations is a lot different today than it was 10, 15 years ago. You can literally Google sort of stuff. You can hear people speak. And what I learned and I had other opportunities that were sort of in the hopper at the same time. And the reason I say I chose Fairfax, Fairfax chose me. I saw a presentation of the county executive at the joint school board of supervisors meeting